My name is Rabbi Brian Walt. I'm really so honored to speak here at this press conference with the moral heroes in the Congress who have called for a ceasefire. Thanks so much to you for your moral courage. As you may know, we rabbis led a service this morning. We read a service this morning in the context of our commitment to a ceasefire. So you may ask, why did we come here to have a morning service? It was a regular morning service of the Jewish calendar. We came here to do that because for us, this issue is not just a political issue, it's a spiritual issue. And we wanted to speak to the spiritual issue that lies at the heart of this conflict. And this issue spiritually that lies at the heart of this conflict is the idea somehow that it's either us or them. It's teams. It's either our team or your team. It's win-lose. But in a spiritual service, it's not about us and them. It's about us. And that ultimately, unless we figure out how we can be a big us, the kinds of terrible things that we are now seeing in Gaza and that we saw in Israel are going to happen continuously, even in the Promised Land, and maybe especially in the Promised Land. And so this morning, the rabbis who were involved in the service took the service and did exactly that. It was a really inspiring service. So I want to say just a moment, first start with a word about the effect of the Hamas attack on our Israeli brothers, Jewish brothers and sisters, and non-Jewish brothers and sisters, some of whom also suffered in that attack. Most Jews and almost all Israelis know someone who's been taken as a hostage, or they know someone who was killed. So for them, this issue is not an issue that's somehow a conceptual issue. It's a live issue about a live human being that they care about and love. And I must say that even for myself, who hasn't been to Israel for several years now, I know in my friendship circle here in the United States, I have friends whose loved ones have been taken as hostages, and I have friends who know people who have been killed. We are all grieving that loss of life, and we are shocked by the brutality of that attack on children, women, and the violations of human rights, and we condemn those violations of human rights, and we grieve for the people who are hostages now and for those who are suffering the loss of people who were killed. But for us, because it's not either or, it's both. We are also rabbis not for human rights, that was another game. We also rabbis for a ceasefire, because our grief and suffering does not end with the suffering of Jews in Israel. We insist that in our tradition, Kol ha'ma'abed nefesh achat ki'ilu ibed olam maleh. Translated, anyone who destroys a single soul, it's as if they destroyed a whole world, because each person is a world within themselves. And so over the past few weeks, as I've watched the horrible, terrible, horrifying pictures from Gaza on the screen and read about it, I have felt in my heart just immense sadness, wondering whether the tradition that I was raised in, the Jewish tradition that I love, the ethical and spiritual basis of that tradition was now to be ruined. Was this the end of Judaism as an ethical spiritual tradition? I think this morning's service proudly reclaimed that ethical legacy. And yet, there's all the actions that Israel's taken that has created a mass humanitarian disaster in Gaza, in which over 11 or 12,000 maybe people have been killed, including many, many children. And how can the Jewish state close its ears and its hearts to the cries of the children, to babies who are lying under the rubble of buildings and aren't even found often, to the families that are wiped out, to the hunger for food, to the incredible difficulty of getting even water that is to drink, or hospitals to take care for them? For us as rabbis, for ceasefire, this issue is about that massive, deadly assault on the most densely populated land in the world. I was born just 7 years before the Holocaust. Never again was central to the Judaism I learned as a child, and never again has been important part of the Jewish tradition. This is a moral outrage that is happening. How many children will need to die before people insist on a ceasefire? And lastly, I started my talk by saying that we're connected. The problem that we have in the Middle East is precisely because the parties, and both parties, but especially Israel as the dominant party, has refused to negotiate in good faith for a sharing of the piece of land that both peoples live on. And that needs to happen because the future, the safety of the Jewish people and the Palestinian people are intertwined. Apartheid in Israel must be abolished. It must be abolished. And Gaza must be rebuilt. And we must create a place where Jews and Palestinians can live in equality, freedom, and justice. So thank you for calling a ceasefire, and thank you to all the rabbis that led us this morning in suggesting it's not either or, it's both and that's the spiritual insight of this moment. Thank you.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Rabbi Walt, and thank you to all the members of Congress who have signed on to this resolution. We're grateful for your leadership, for your bravery in working to save lives and to take this first step to true safety and freedom for both Israelis and Palestinians. I'm deeply honored to introduce Congresswoman Tlaib. We in Detroit are proud to call her Rashida. She spoke the following in a moving speech from the floor last week. She said, "I'm the only Palestinian American serving in Congress, and my perspective is needed here now more than ever. I will not be silenced, and I will not let you distort my words." Where is she? Rashida. Rashida, we need you. We need you. We will not let them distort your words or defame your character. The signers of this resolution do not value one people over another, heaven forbid. And to say so is slander. To say so is slander, which is an avera, is a transgression in our tradition. Last week you said the cries of the Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. Rashida means that. The resolution seeks to live that. It seeks to stop this horrific violence which only entrenches this ongoing nightmare. Thank you, Rashida. We love you.
I lovingly call Rabbi Elena my rabbi. But I want to thank you all so much for your courage, because I know it's not been easy. I know for me, my Jewish neighbors in my district, in the 12th Congressional District, I talked to one of my Jewish neighbors who's a leader in the Jewish community, who said, "You know, Rashida, my children are in Jerusalem." I said, "My grandmother is in the West Bank with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. We have more to lose if we don't get a ceasefire, if we don't move towards coexistence and towards understanding this violence is not making anyone safe." So thank you again. I am proud incredibly proud to stand in solidarity with the rabbis here, the Jewish peace advocates here today calling for an immediate ceasefire and end of the violence. Thank you again for your voice and courage at this moment in time. While there are growing attempts to silence those speaking up for human rights, even in this chamber, fighting to save lives, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity, should not be controversial. My colleagues must recognize our shared humanity, the value of human life. There are millions of people across our country right now who are horrified watching the government support collective punishment of Palestinians while the Israeli government continues to carry war crimes by cutting off water, food, and life-saving medical care. I know I've seen the stats. I mean, the polling shows the majority of Americans, over 65% of Americans, including 80% of them being Democrats, want a ceasefire. They are also horrified that our president is calling on Congress to find more bombs that are being dropped on innocent civilians. Our movement for a ceasefire is only growing stronger. I say this all the time, consistently to my colleagues. When they tell me that folks are coming to their offices, I said, it's not me. It's your constituents. It's your residents that are asking you to speak up and end the violence. We will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. And we will not stop until we save lives. We will continue to demand a ceasefire, demand the immediate delivery of humanitarian aid in Gaza, demand the release of all hostages and those arbitrarily detained, demand every American to come home, and demand that Palestinian people to live free from occupation. 11,000 Palestinians. Just like you, Rabbi, I know someone that knows someone that has been impacted by the continued killings, including over 4,000 children. I know Netanyahu and his extremist government are now saying that Israeli forces would take security responsibility for Gaza for an indefinite period of time. That's not about safety. The forced displacement of Palestinians began, as you all know, 75 years ago. The occupation has been ongoing for over 56 years. Perpetuating this illegal occupation will not lead to a just and lasting peace. We already know. We tried. It didn't work. The path to peace must include addressing the root causes of our conflict and ending the blockade and the occupation. Folks laugh all the time when I tell my cousins who are married Israeli citizens that coexistence so beautifully is even denied as they love each other, as they have children together, denied even their existence. To the calling again of a humanitarian pause, know this, let me ask you please, as you all for a humanitarian pause, how many more lives will be enough? How many more children have to be killed? How many more families traumatized and torn apart? There is nothing humanitarian about giving innocent civilians a 4-hour break before they are bombed. We are calling for an end to the violence, not a break in the violence. The humanitarian pause is not enough. President Biden, I hope you're listening. I'm consistent in telling this over and over again. You must listen to the voices of the majority of Americans who are calling for a ceasefire now. So today, again, please look to the majority of your residents, many of which supported you. They're calling you to do what's right. End the violence, support a ceasefire now.
No, go ahead. I was just going to introduce you.
Go ahead.
The leader of the ceasefire now resolution, Representative Cori Bush. I love you. And I'm so honored to be here with all of you. And let me start by saying to everyone, thank you for joining here today, and specifically my sister in service, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, for all of your fight, for all that you go through that none of us even understand. And to all of my other courageous members of Congress who are here today in support of humanity, peace, and justice for all in Israel and in Palestine. And to my friends, to the rabbis who are standing up here today, first of all, thank you for welcoming me this morning. thank you for showing so much love and support and also grace. And to those who traveled here to DC today to demand a ceasefire, I want to thank you for not only your courage, but for your unwavering commitment to humanity and to the belief that all life is precious. I know that I heard earlier today from one of our rabbis that all life is sacred. Sacred. Israeli lives and Palestinian lives are precious, are sacred. That Muslim lives and Jewish lives and Christian lives and Hindu lives and every one of us, all of our lives are precious, are sacred. That every human life is equally precious, and that the taking of every life through violence is equally repugnant. Your presence here today exemplifies your commitment to your faith beliefs without exception. Together we grieve and mourn the 1,200 Israelis brutally murdered and the 250 people taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th. We grieve and we mourn the over 11,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of them women and children, who have been killed in Gaza and the West Bank by the Israeli government. We grieve and mourn the depraved, unconscionable attacks on places of refuge, including schools and health facilities and places of worship as the world watches. We grieve the babies in incubators being left there to die. And it makes me think about my own baby, my premature baby that was born at 23 weeks. I was less than 6 months pregnant, and all I wanted to do was see my baby alive. All I wanted to do was make sure that the ventilator worked. All I wanted was to make sure that the doctor saw my little black baby on Medicaid as equal to the white babies laying there with coverage. That was commercial. I can't fathom what these parents are going through right now. My heart breaks. As I grieve and I mourn, and as innocent people continue to be killed daily, I look to my own faith, and I am constantly reminded of a prayer that I learned as a child, and one that I've turned to a lot lately. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is despair, let me sow hope. That part of that prayer reminds me that we all have the ability to be champions of love. We have the ability to be champions of justice. We have the ability to be conduits of peace. No matter your faith, your background, your nationality, your ethnicity, anyone, regardless of what you did yesterday that someone may deem ugly or unacceptable, you can still stand on the side of justice. You only need to be yet willing. So often my colleagues in Congress quote Dr. King. They evoke Dr. King. They misappropriate Dr. King. But would they have stood with Dr. King? This is that type of moment, the moment where it hurts, the moment where you're isolated and you're alone, but it's the right thing. It's the necessary thing, but it is not the easy thing. The time to lead is now. And it isn't easy. They label us anti-Israel. They label us anti-Semitic, and they label us terrorists. They lie about us and they smear us. But we know the truth, and the truth stands. We are rabbis. We are pastors. We are Congress members. We are surviving family members. We are human beings, and we are bound by our faith to demand a ceasefire now, to demand an end to the violence now, to demand that love and peace and justice and humanity reigns and is at the center of all of our work now, not tomorrow, not next week, not in a month, not in a year, now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Thank you.
I'd like to invite up Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you all so much for being here. I apologize, my voice is a little hoarse, but that does not stop us from speaking up and speaking out. I can't tell you how comforting it is to have all of you here, to have our rabbinic leaders here. I went to public school, grew up and went to public school in Westchester County with a lot of precocious and compassionate kids, which is to say, I had a lot of Jewish friends growing up. And I grew up with great fellowship with the Jewish community. And, you know, to think about what Representative Bush just said, when I think about the things that the Jewish families, my Jewish friends, my Jewish community that I grew up with taught me growing up, how they shaped me, it is that the unconditional centering and value of all human dignity and life is one of the most Jewish things in the world. And the idea that calling for a ceasefire would somehow be anti-Semitic is actually so upside down. It's actually contrary to the values of this community that helped raise me, frankly. I think so much about where we are in this moment, the courage that it takes to speak up in this moment, and the urgency of this moment. I think about the language that is being used in this moment. The language. Over 4,000 children have been killed. Over 10,000 people have died. In addition to the horror of the 12 to 1,400 lives taken on October 7th as well. And when I think about this threshold that we've passed in Gaza, 4,000 children, 10,000 innocent, and the attempts for people to call this quote unquote collateral damage, how unconscionable a term, collateral damage, to sanitize an atrocity, to make it more palatable for mass consumption, collateral damage. We can never accept such a term. The killing of children, the killing of innocent people will never be collateral damage. It is the damage. It is the damage. The taking and continued imperiling of hostages is the damage. Every child lost is a world lost. That is the damage. It is the center. There is nothing collateral about it. It should be our central and most guiding value, protecting the innocent. That is what ceasefire now means. And so when folks try to say and malign about what ceasefire may imply, let's make it crystal clear tonight what ceasefire means. Ceasefire means release the hostages. All the hostages. Ceasefire means stop the bombardment now. Ceasefire means defend the innocent. Ceasefire means transcend cycles of violence. To me, in that sense, ceasefire is not just realpolitik, it is spiritual. We are being called to be higher than our history. We are being called to transcend the tit for tat. We are being called to transcend the sanitation of atrocity. We are being called to center human value and human dignity above all else. That is what ceasefire now means. We will not be afraid. We will not back down. We will demand more of our president. We will demand better of our president. Ceasefire is not just an option. It is our only way out of this. Ceasefire means there is no military solution, only a diplomatic and cultural solution. A relational solution. A reckoning with ourselves and our history. That is what ceasefire now means. And I will never, ever, ever back away from those values. We are here in front of the Capitol of the United States of America. And sometimes when I land here in Washington, I call it the upside down. I call it the upside down because when the American people say up, they say down. When they say left, they go right. When 80% of American citizens say they want a ceasefire, 90-something% of this place says keep the bombardment going. We will not allow that to deter us. We will not allow that to deter us. Now is the moment. Ceasefire is the answer. And it is difficult. And there are implications. And we must wrestle with what those are. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It means we should figure it out. I cannot thank everyone that is here enough so much. Thank you, Jewish Voices for Peace, that has a legitimate role in this dialogue. Thank you to our rabbis who have joined us. Thank you to Representative Rashida Tlaib, who has stood as the only Palestinian American woman in the history of the United States. And they have censured her for standing for her humanity. We will not allow that to deter us. This is our moment. This is the moment for all who stand up for human dignity. Thank you to our co-leads, Representative Bush. Thank you to Delia Ramirez. Thank you to Andre Carson. Thank you to all of our co-sponsors and to every single person who is considering and weighing heavily in their heart if this is the right thing to do. I want you to take this as a sign. I want you to take this as the open door. Join us. Yes, the time is now. Yes, the sign is it. Right now, call for a ceasefire. It is the right thing to do. And that is why we're here today. Thank you all so very much.
Okay, Representative Jonathan Jackson.
Good evening. I am honored to be here with my colleagues that are on the right side of history. Some have called us the new left, but we're on the right side of history. As we ask for a ceasefire, my colleague, Ms. Cortez, so eloquently described it, we have to define what ceasefire means. Ceasefire means let us talk. Ceasefire means that we're on the side of reconciliation. Ceasefire means that we want to have clean hearts, but are willing to have dirty hands to bring enemies and people that are adversarial together so they can build a lasting peace. Ceasefire means no more children to be killed that are innocent. Ceasefire means no more hospitals bombed. Ceasefire means that no more homes are destroyed. We are now looking at the largest refugee crisis in the world. Over 1 million plus people have now been displaced. Their land is so toxic, it'll be hard to even rebuild back on that community. I had the opportunity just this past September to go with AIPAC on a trip to Israel to see the motherland. And they also took us to Rwanda. They were eager to show us, many of the Israeli officials, the connection they had with Rwanda, both having a shared history, one of Holocaust and both of genocide. In Rwanda, let me remind you that in 1993, 1 million people were killed in 100 days. One of the most bloodied, soiled parts of our earth. In 2003, 5 million people between the DRC and Rwanda were killed on that soil. But what did Rwanda do? They used their intelligence and went after the 30,000 perpetrators of violence, and now Rwanda is a peaceful, loving nation that has taken people to an international court and has received justice. Rwanda now has the 4th most amount of people on peacekeeping around the world. If it was good enough for Rwanda to seek peace and reconciliation, it is good enough for the Israelis and the Palestinians to work towards reconciliation. When Nelson Mandela came out of jail, you remember, he, along with his jailer captor, both received the Nobel Peace Prize at the same time. We did not ask them for violence. We asked them for reconciliation. African Americans, after 400 years, no one at any time has told us to seek retribution and vengeance. They ask about reconciliation. So to my Jewish brothers and Palestinian brothers, we are fighting for you. We're here today across many ethnic and racial and ecumenical lines. I want to thank the Jewish rabbis for the courage. I know the venomous things that have been said to you. These are the blessed peacekeepers in our scriptures. They teach us in the book of Matthew. Blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers. The peacemakers are the ones that are willing to have dirty hands to reconcile. People aren't on the same page. The rabbis, thank you for taking the lead. You're outstanding to your community. You're outstanding to our country. You're outstanding to your nation in Israel. At this time, I would like to ask my next colleague, who is coming up, to the honorable, distinguished, keenly articulate and persuasively analytical, the Congresswoman from the great state of Illinois, Congresswoman Dalia Ramirez.
We are both from the state of Illinois. I am repeating this worship song that I learned in church as a little girl as Reverend Cori Bush talked about peace. Hazme un instrumento de tu paz. Hazme un instrumento de tu paz. Make me an instrument of your peace. As I stand with you here today, I am reminded of the faith that has brought me to this place. I am reminded that my faith has called me and called us to be an instrument of peace. But I'm also reminded that oftentimes people have used religion to oppress the other, and that is not being an instrument of peace. In this difficult time, even when our words have been distorted, when our character has been questioned, and we have endured threats of violence, I choose to be faithful, full of faith. I choose to be sure in my hope that we can uphold our shared humanity, even when we disagree. That we can pursue long-lasting peace through diplomacy. That we can realize free and safe communities where all people flourish. My hope is informed by my certainty of all that we cannot always see. That we are interconnected and we are interdependent on one another. That our futures are bound together. And that we cannot bomb our way to a true and long-lasting peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. And friends, I believe that remaining hopeful is also an act of resistance. Because in hard moments when faith feels so difficult, I've been here 11 months, I can tell you every single minute has felt difficult. Not every moment. Okay. Most moments. I am also reminded that I'm not alone. That you are with us. That they are with me. And that we are with the people all over the world calling for a ceasefire right now. Just last week, a group of veterans joined us right here. I call loud and clear for a ceasefire. They talked about what they have to relive every single day as they were enlisted post 9/11 and what they're still remembering every single moment. And all over the world, we are rejecting the inhumane idea that only some lives are worth protecting and recognizing that the lives, the futures, and the collective safety of all of us must be our priority. So as I wrap up here, because I lost my points, let me just go with the heart here. Let me just go with the heart. Look, you heard it from my colleagues. We shouldn't have to justify why we're calling for a ceasefire. My colleagues and others should be justifying why they're not calling for a ceasefire. We shouldn't have to be having to remind people that loving on people is the greatest power and the way we get to peace. So as we are here with rabbis, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, from all walks of life, I invite every single person that is looking at us and that sees among us there are many shades, maybe, well, one shade missing, that we cannot quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and not stand on the side of justice and liberation for all of us, not just some of us. That if you care so deeply for the hostages as we care so deeply for the hostages, then you can't bomb the hostages. That if you care about the children and you serve on committees and you came here and you said, I came to Congress because I care about the children, which I've heard some of my colleagues say, what about the children? Well, what about the Palestinian children? Sign on to the ceasefire. And if you truly want this to never happen, ever, ever again to anyone, then we have to cease fire, seek diplomacy, and work towards long-lasting peace. That is what we're not going to shy about. We're not going to be apologetic about, and we're going to continue to call for it, even when it makes our colleagues most uncomfortable. Because the faith that I believe in is that maybe that's the Spirit calling you to come back to the faith that you say you have. And so if we have to be that testament, walking testament, then let's so be it, so that we can get to 20, 30, 40, 50 until we finally pass a ceasefire resolution right now. So thank you. Let's keep going. To the rabbis, thank you for reminding us that our faith calls us to peace and justice. And with that, I am going to call, I can't see here. Or you want to?
I don't think it says here.
She's going to tell you who's going to.
Thank you. I'm actually going to invite up two of my rabbinic colleagues, Rabbi Abby Stein and Rabbi Salem Pierce.
Hi. I'm Rabbi Salem Pierce. I am here today as a proud inheritor of the Jewish prophetic tradition. In 1965, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marched with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, carrying the Torah. It was there that he said, I felt like my legs were praying. Jews in our community often want to be the inheritors of Rabbi Heschel's prophetic vision. We talk less about Rabbi Heschel's anti-war vision. And explaining to a reporter why he was at a Vietnam War protest, Rabbi Heschel said, I'm here because I cannot pray. Whenever I open the prayer book, I see before me images of children burning from napalm. He later wrote in more detail in his landmark book on the prophets. He said, the more deeply immersed I became in the thinking of the prophets, the more powerfully it became clear to me what the lives of the prophets sought to convey. That morally speaking, there is no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings. It also became clear to me that in regard to cruelties committed in the name of a free society, few are guilty, while all are responsible. He quotes Leviticus, thou shalt not stand idly by the blood of thy neighbor. And he says, this is not a recommendation, but an imperative, a supreme commandment. So it is in Rabbi Heschel's spirit that I'm here today as a rabbi for ceasefire. I'm here because I cannot pray. I'm here because when I open my prayer book, I see kidnapped and killed children. There's no limit to the concern I feel for the suffering of human beings. I may not be guilty, but I am responsible. And I will not stand idly by the blood of my neighbor.
I'm Abby Stein. I'm a rabbi. I'm an educator. I'm a queer Jew from New York, and I'm also an Israeli citizen. in Sefer Devarim, in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, we're told of what to do if there's a dead body next to a city. The elders, the leaders of that community are invited up, and they have to say, Yedeinu lo shafchu et adam hazeh, ve'einenu lo ra'u. Our hands did not shed his blood, our eyes did not see who did. Can any of us here tonight say that we don't have blood on our hands? Because none of us can say that we did not see. I'm standing here not in spite of the fact that I'm an Israeli citizen, that my father, my grandmother, going back generations in Jerusalem, going back generations in other parts of Israel. I'm not here in spite of that, I'm here because of it. When I call for a ceasefire, it's for my family, for my aunts, for my uncles. It's for my son who has 3 Israeli grandparents. Because I know that none of us will ever be safe while we keep doing what we're doing. Yes. I woke up on October 7th, and as soon as I heard the news, I felt that I'm going to know people who were there. I'm part of a tight-knit community of people who tend to go to parties on holidays, to put it short. It took me just a few hours to realize that 4 people that I knew were missing. It took me until Wednesday, as I went back and forward with a friend of mine's sister, a woman 7 months pregnant, trying to figure out what's going on with her brother. We finally found him after a few days, after his body was identified. This is personal, but it shouldn't have to be. We are all here as rabbis for ceasefire, not just as people who happen to believe in don't kill, which sounds like a bare minimum. But we're here not people who happen to be Jewish, who happen to be rabbis, but because of it. I know that I don't feel safe, and I know that every day that this continues, more of us wouldn't be safe. Like everyone else has said here, we all know people who are still being kept hostages. What the Israeli government is literally doing in my name, I have a document called a passport that proves that. They're claiming they're doing it for us, but I don't see it, I don't feel it, we don't see it, we don't feel it. Killing 12,000 Palestinians isn't making us safe. We are here today because we understand that the only way any of us will truly be safe is if we're all safe together. You can try to kill people you label terrorists, but you can't kill an idea. We know it. For 2,000 years, we have held on to a hope. We know that you cannot kill the hope out of people. You can try to drop tens of thousands of tons of bombs. What Israel is doing right now isn't destroying Hamas, they're creating 10 more. And that's going to keep happening. So I'm begging you. I'm being a bit selfish. Do it for me. Do it for Representative Rashida's family. But do it for all of our families. Do it for all of us. Ceasefire now. It's not hard. Just stop killing.
I'd like to invite up Representative Nadia Velasquez.
Good evening, everyone. And I am so proud of Rashida Tlaib. She just stepped out. And I am so proud of all my colleagues here. And I am so grateful that you're here. You see, this place could be a lonely place. especially during difficult times. So we needed your voices. We needed your presence. And I am here standing before you as a Puerto Rican woman. My homeland, Puerto Rico, still is a colony of the United States. And we are still struggling for 124 years to give and to recognize the right of the people of Puerto Rico to self-determination. So this, to me, is personal. And I feel that this moment has found us, that we are committed to use the power of our votes, the power of our presence, to make the case that in this instance, we choose life over conflict. We choose life over war. History will judge us. Yesterday, I was in Puerto Rico. We were in a conference there, 2,400 Puerto Ricans from the Puerto Rican diaspora. And some of my friends asked me, Nydia, this is a political risk that you're taking. And I said, this is not about a political decision. This is not about the next election. This is about who we are and the values that bind us together. So to watch the images coming out of Israel and see the brutality and the atrocities that were committed, it just moved us. There is so much pain. And there's so much pain watching the atrocities that have been committed against the Palestinian people. Because the Palestinian people are not Hamas. But how do we protect the lives of the Palestinian people in the quest of destroying Hamas? And the previous rabbi said it well. Imagine those children who have witnessed their parents being killed, their brothers and sisters being killed. Do you think that they are not going to have the type of resentment that will make it difficult to achieve a long-lasting peace in the Middle East? For God's sake, let's do this. We can do this for the peace that the people of Israel and the people of Palestine deserve. And the United States must play a role, an active role, in bringing both sides together and decide to protect human lives, especially those of our children. God bless you all. Thank you.
Representative Jamal Bowman.
Good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here with you all. I'm very grateful. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words. It's great to stand with my colleagues here. I see we all are having similar conversations back in our districts about this issue of ceasefire. What for me is about not just simple common sense, but it's about humanity. Period. It's not complicated. It's very, very simple. You know, people text me all the time. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you go back to that place and work every week. And I texted back recently. I texted back because of the courage of others. And I just want to take a moment to just recognize the courage of Rashida Tlaib. Rashida, I love you so much. And your courage is why I'm here, standing here, calling for a ceasefire. It's because of your courage and who you are and what you represent. Thank you to the rabbis for ceasefire. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. You know, unfortunately in my district, 26 rabbis wrote a letter against me calling for a ceasefire. And I haven't been able to stand with them or visit any synagogues in my district. So to stand here with you is really humbling, and I'm really grateful for it. Thank you so much. And I've heard what was said here this evening before, that by me calling for a ceasefire with my colleagues and centering humanity, I am uplifting deeply what it actually means to be Jewish. Because I'm centering the way in which God wants us to live with each other. So I feel grateful to be standing here. You know, I don't have much to add. I mean, I associate myself with everything my colleagues have said, but I've been thinking about a couple things, and I'll reiterate one part of it. We cannot bomb our way to peace. And we've been bombing not just Gaza, but America has a history of bombing countries and people. And, you know, I was watching Ta-Nehisi Coates in an interview recently on Democracy Now!, where he asked the question, are we corrupted by violence? And I think we are. I think Congress is corrupted by violence. I think the White House might be corrupted by violence. Because how can we allow the siege that is taking place right now in Gaza, the collective punishment on Palestinian civilians, 4,000 children and counting. I was standing there thinking about my time as a middle school principal. I was a middle school principal in the Bronx. I served 250 kids every year for 10 years. That's 2,500 kids, right? So imagine every kid that I've ever served murdered and killed 2 times over. That is what I'm standing there thinking about as I think about the children in Gaza. Children who could have been doctors, architects, engineers, teachers, members of Congress, anything they wanted to be, their lives taken away by a fascist, right-wing, destructive government in Israel. The Israeli government does not represent Judaism or Jewish values and the Jewish people. It does not. Just like Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people. And so we have to hold these governments accountable for how they behave and treat people in the name of the people they're supposed to represent. We have to be honest about that. And I'm inspired by the movement that's happening in America and around the world calling for a ceasefire. Because it's this kind of movement that is going to force Congress to finally do the right thing. So we have to keep calling for and demanding a ceasefire. Because if we allow one child to be killed, we have been corrupted by violence. And we are succumbing to the most savage, brutal nature of what it is to be human. And this is the moment for us to evolve into a new humanity that we have never experienced before. And it's going to be on us to create that humanity. Because throughout human history, it's been littered with war and conflict and misery and suffering and genocide and bombs and missiles and the killing of children. I want the next evolution of humanity to be one of true peace. But we can't get to peace unless we have justice for all people, especially and including the Palestinians. Without justice for Palestinians, there will continue to be this conflict and this war. And we need to continue to come together and fight for equality within and for all of us. Because that's what we have here. We have Jews, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have everybody in between, I'm sure. But this is the coalition that is going to help us to realize, help us to manifest the best versions of ourselves as a human race. It is going to be all of us. So God bless you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words. Thank you, Cori and Rashida, for writing this resolution, because I didn't know what I was going to do when I saw that other resolution. I was like, yo, I can't sign that. And y'all came to save me, so I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And listen, we're gonna win for humanity. We're gonna win for humanity, because this is not about power and land and money and nonsense that continues to kill us and destroy us. This is about people, and this is about love. And Cori, I don't know my Bible that well, but I know a couple lines. So I want to leave us with 3 words. 3 words from the Messiah himself. Love thy neighbor. All right, Cori, I got that? Love thy neighbor, y'all. Thank you all so much.
You didn't know what he was going to say. Representative Summer Lee.
Listen, when my brother Jamal gets on the mic, you don't know where it's going to go, but it's going somewhere that we need to be. I want to thank everybody so much for being here. I'm a freshman member. I'm Summer Lee. I represent the 12th Congressional District in Pittsburgh, a town that is reeling from one of the worst anti-Semitic attacks in the history of the United States. It's a community that has been in constant grief, not just since October 7th, but much longer, since 10/27 in 2020, or excuse me, in 2018. When I came into this job, I had no way of preparing myself for this, for the crisis of this magnitude, but not just the crisis, but the way that we are received in calling for common sense, a ceasefire, calling for peace, calling for love, calling for our shared humanity to be centered. And when I heard that these rabbis were going to be here, I, like Jamal and Cori, I also had rabbis who have taken issue with our stance. So to be here with these courageous, bold rabbis speaking truth to power is medicine for my heart, because I didn't know a pain could exist like this. But it's a reminder to me that our liberation is tied together. We say it in the tradition of our black movements for liberation, that our liberation is tied together. So whether we're black or brown or Muslim or Jewish, Israeli or Palestinian, here we are standing for our collective shared humanity. And it is the highest calling of each and every one of us. Today and every day, we are here together to hold the 1,200 innocent Israelis who were killed by Hamas, to lift up the 250 hostages that we are still, each and every one of us, still fighting to bring home. But we're also here because our hearts are big enough to grieve those lost. I got it right here, don't you worry. I'm a true millennial. That's why I pulled it out in the beginning to come with. But our hearts are large enough to grieve those lost on October 7th, and every single soul since then. We can and we must also grieve the thousands of Palestinian civilians who have been taken from us. Every day, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is becoming an unmitigated catastrophe. You've heard the numbers, and I will reiterate them, because every time we say it, it is meaningful. 11,000 Palestinians have been killed, over 4,300 children, babies. There are 2.2 million people in Gaza. 1.7 million of them have been displaced. That's 77%. Back in my district, I met a community member who had lost 49 members of his family. I've since met other folks. Another person who had lost 99 members of their families. And that number isn't even unique anymore. hearing that isn't even unique anymore. There have been full bloodlines that have been erased due to the indiscriminate bombings. Nobody is safe. Critical infrastructure is gone. There are no more universities in Gaza. Houses and churches and mosques, schools and playgrounds, marketplaces and hospitals have been targeted and destroyed. Hospitals. Just yesterday, Doctors Without Borders described the dire situation in Gaza. In the midst of the bombardment on hospital grounds, people are being murdered while waiting for treatment for their wounds that they came with. 3 babies have died in the NICU. There are 36 more babies who are fighting for their lives because there is no electricity, there is no food, and there is no water in Al-Shifa Hospital. This is why we are calling for a ceasefire now. We must understand the urgency of this moment. Rabbis and Jewish community members around the world are saying, not in our name. Not in our name. And my colleagues who are standing with us today are saying, not on our watch. Not on our watch will we stand silently by as our colleagues and the president authorize more bombs to Israel, but band-aids to Gaza. Not on our watch will we co-sign what we know is a war on babies. This right to defense does not mean a right to kill indiscriminately. This moment is now the movement and the call for peace that we need, a call to center our shared humanity, and we are our nation's pro-peace movement. All of us who are seeking to build a future where everyone, no matter where they live, has the opportunity to achieve their dreams free from the worry of death and war and destruction. So thank you so much to the rabbis who are here with us today and who welcomed me and our colleagues here. Thank you for your courage and for your strength. I'm committed, we are committed to continuing this fight shoulder to shoulder with you for peace, for human rights, and for the fight against anti-Semitism here and everywhere that we see it, and for the dignity of all people. I don't know who we're calling up next, but let me say, this has been Ayanna Presley. But let me say, we pray for the day where the line to speak is so long, because every single one of our colleagues is calling for a ceasefire, and every single one of our colleagues is calling to protect life, to protect babies. So next up, my sister in service, Ayanna Presley.
As someone who was raised in a small storefront church on the south side of Chicago, may my grandfather, the Reverend James E. Eccles, who's now an ancestor, rest in peace and power. Whenever I felt burdened, my grandfather would sing a song we very often sang in church: "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Joy has not come. Joy has not come because my heart is heavy with grief. It grieves for the 1,200 Israeli civilians who were heinously murdered by Hamas on October 7th. It grieves for the 240 hostages still held by Hamas and their families. And it grieves for the over 11,000 Palestinian civilians killed by the Israeli military in the weeks since, nearly half of whom are children. Joy has not come in the morning because the loss of life we have seen in a mere 5 weeks is overwhelming, devastating, incomprehensible. Entire generations of Palestinian families erased entirely. Again, vengeance is not a foreign policy doctrine. Hospitals bombed, electricity shut off, food, fuel, and medicine dwindling, clean drinking water essentially non-existent. I stood at this podium 3 weeks ago to mourn the 1,100 Palestinian children killed by Israeli bombs. Today, that number is nearly 5 times higher. Children. I am haunted by the words and the images of the Palestinian children in Gaza who convened their own press conference in English so that you would not misunderstand their desperate appeals to live. They said, we want to live. We want peace. It has been children in this society, and what a damning commentary that our children are always having to make appeals for their lives, from March for Our Lives, to the children of Tigray, to the children of Soweto, to the children of Gaza, pleading for mercy and to live. There is no justification for the collective punishment of the Palestinian people, from their elders to their babies. As people of faith, we believe that we are all God's children, Palestinian, Israeli, Americans alike. Regardless of our religion or nation of birth, we are one human family, and we have a moral obligation to be our brothers and our sisters' keeper, a collective righteous mandate to save lives. And the mandate is clear. Ceasefire now. We are not alone, and we are not afraid. Millions across the globe have echoed our calls for an end to the bloodshed, from the United Nations and the Pope to the President of France and healthcare workers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which I represent. This is a movement that is pro-peace, pro-faith, and pro-humanity. And this movement is growing every day. Last month, I sat with the families of hostages who spoke of deep love and grief, and they made it clear that they didn't want vengeance. They just want their loved ones safely home. Ceasefire now. Every action taken by policymakers in this moment should be in pursuit of peace, not an escalation of violence and bloodshed. The United States cannot allow the Israeli government to commit war crimes, to violate international law, and to operate with callous disregard for human life. Children are dying, families are crying out for survival, and our shared humanity is in danger. A ceasefire is the mandate, and we must respond accordingly. Okay. It's that righteous indignation that's keeping us warm out here. Okay, so now I think we'll bring Representative Omar.
Yeah, and then we'll have some final words from rabbis after Representative.
Okay, all right.
Hi. Thank you, Rabbi Wise, for the invitation, and to my constituent, Rabbi Rosenberg, for really leading the charge for this. There is something fascinating and bizarre in the fact that there are people who seem to be upset that there are rabbis and other people of faith out here asking for ceasefire. And it's bizarre, because you would assume that if you are a religious leader, if you are a faith leader, that your number one priority would be to look into your faith, into the teachings of your faith, and to say, I oppose violence. I oppose the massacre of children. I oppose the destruction of lives. But it's also fascinating in that it is not surprising, because throughout history, the opposite has happened. We have seen faith leaders use their own faith to justify massacres, to justify genocide, to justify violence, to justify rape. And so I am glad to be with the righteous ones who are on the right side of history today in front of the People's House. I was just in Minnesota this past weekend, and there was an incredible rally yesterday called Families for Ceasefire. It was mothers and fathers with little babies pushing strollers that carried banners that said ceasefire now. It was fathers who had their kids over their shoulders carrying signs that said, I, as a child, am for the children of Gaza. There were little ones like my own who can walk, who also had their little signs with little flowers that said, let Gaza live. And it was a beautiful sight because there are so many children in today's world who are witnessing with their own eyes the massacre that is taking place, the unfolding genocide of Gaza, of Palestinians in Gaza. Little kids in Somalia had a big march in the capital of Mogadishu, where I was born. These are kids who have their own violence to deal with, but they recognize what they are dealing with is nothing close to what the children in Gaza are dealing with. So they banded together, created their little posters, and were marching through the streets of Mogadishu. That humanity that those children are showing is the humanity that we need every single person to show. The devastating death toll is something we can no longer be silent about. We have over 11,000 people killed just little over a month. Over 40% of that are children. Some who have not gotten to celebrate their first birthday, have not even got to walk. Overwhelming majority of those are women who themselves are watched, possibly, the death of their own children. Yes, in the last couple of weeks before we first had this press conference, a lot more people have gotten on board. We are seeing so many people pushing for a ceasefire in ways that we have not seen before. But the death and destruction still continues. Israel is being allowed to bomb caged people with impunity. And our own government is preparing and pushing for us to give them more ammunition to kill more children, more mothers, more elderly. There was a heartbreaking video I watched today of a couple who were deaf. Their son was translating for them in order for the interview to carry on. And they talked about how terrified they were because they can't hear the bombs. They can't hear the shouting. They can't hear people fleeing. So they are trapped. I mean, how many of these stories do you have to hear? Or do people in our government have to hear in order for them to have the tears they had when Ukraine was getting bombed? For them to have the shock and sadness and sorrow when Ukraine was being bombed? I remember all of my colleagues, we all huddled, completely devastated. for the mass destruction and the loss of lives. And now they all look at us as if we are the ones that are killing people, even though they're the ones that are staying silent as people are being killed. Somehow we are being questioned. Our humanity is being questioned when our heart breaks for the 12,000 Israelis that were killed and over the 11,000 Palestinians that are killed. But no one questions the humanity and the hearts of those who can only see a loss of life on one side, who could only mourn for the death of one people. So I ask you all today to ask yourselves, who are the peacemakers? The ones who are warmongering or the ones who are calling for a ceasefire? Who are the ones who are lost? The ones who want more death or the ones who want the death to end? Who is being divisive? The ones that can't see certain people's agony, death, and destruction? Or the ones who can see all? Because if we are going to change this conversation, if we are going to move the hearts and the souls of people that are in this building behind us, we have to start asking the hard questions. We have to start asking where their humanity is. We have to start asking, why do they think it is okay for us to watch Israeli and Palestinian babies not being treated the same? Thank you.
I believe Representative Andre Carson is here. I know that the members of Congress need to get to a vote, so this is going to be our last speaker, and then the rabbis will close us out.
Thank you so much. Briefly, I know we have votes. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Haverim, Assalamu Alaikum wa Rahmatullah. Praise the Lord, but hold off on the ammunition. In the time of great anguish, in the time of great sorrow, in the time of great darkness, who better than our spiritual leaders to take a stand and say, ceasefire now? Who better? We've heard from great pastors. We've heard from great imams and sheikhs. We've heard from the greatest of gurus. But who better to make a statement than our beloved rabbis to say, ceasefire now? We thank you. We love you. Shalom Aleichem.
I'm Rabbi Yosef Berman. We marched here this morning with Torah scrolls passed down from generation to generation with the trust of our ancestors that we will interpret the sacred words to uphold life. In the beginning of Breshit, Genesis, we are taught that the first human is created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of the divine, and every single human being is in the image of the divine. Every single person has inherent dignity and worth. Every murder is an affront to God. And then in Genesis, shortly after that, we hear about Cain, who kills his brother Abel. Cain is asked by God, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain responds with perhaps the most important question in Torah. He says, "Hashomer achi anochi?" Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes. Yes. It is the only way forward. We are all responsible for each other here. Israelis and Palestinians are responsible for one another. We are all responsible for one another. This is the only true path to safety for everyone, to lasting peace. As Rabbi Heschel said about the war in Vietnam, morally speaking, there is no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings. We are here because we hold in our hearts the suffering of our people, of Israelis killed on October 7th, of the hostages and their families, and we hold the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza fleeing bombs with nowhere to go. No limit to concern. Every murder an affront to God. Later in Genesis, God tells Avraham that he's going to destroy an entire city. Avraham says to God, Chalila lecha, kadavar hazel hamit sadikim rasha hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty. Shall not the judge of all of the earth deal justly? To those who malign your work for peace, who distort our call for ceasefire, we remember Heschel, who taught that surely they cannot claim greater majesty than God. I am grateful for the courage of the members of Congress who are here. Thank you for your clarity, for your courage, for fulfilling your responsibility. To other members of Congress, we implore you to take action, and we will be here with you and for you.
Actually, no, it turns out that you have to go. Okay. Just gonna go vote and come right back, okay? Okay. Okay. I said we have to go. We're gonna have to go. Okay. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I think that's the end of our time because the members of Congress had to leave and go vote. Thank you all so much.
If I can make a quick announcement, folks who are not staff or a member or press with credentials, please exit through that exit right there at the request of Capitol Police, and thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate y'all. Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you all. Miriam.